What if I told you that the words you speak every day are shaping your destiny? That the silent battles within your mind are not just passing thoughts, but the architects of your reality? The power to transform your life does not come from external forces. It is already within you, waiting to be unleashed. But first, you must learn to harness it. The power of repetition is one of the most underestimated forces in shaping the human mind. Words, when spoken consistently, do not merely linger in the air, they imprint themselves onto the deepest layers of our subconscious. Every thought, every word, and every phrase, repeated over time, forms an internal narrative that dictates how we perceive ourselves and the world around us. This is not a passive process, but an active conditioning of the mind, much like a sculptor chiseling away at a raw block of marble. Each repetition refines, shapes, and solidifies a belief system that governs emotions, decisions, and ultimately, one's destiny. The human brain is designed to recognize patterns and reinforce them. When a phrase is repeated, neural pathways associated with that statement are strengthened, making it easier for the brain to recall and act upon those words instinctively. This is why habits, whether mental or physical, become second nature over time. The mind does not differentiate between what is real and what is imagined. It simply follows the blueprint it is given. If that blueprint is filled with self-doubt, hesitation, and fear, then those elements will dominate one's life. Conversely, if the blueprint consists of empowerment, confidence, and purpose, then reality will gradually mold itself to reflect those inner convictions. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity breeds belief. The more frequently something is stated, the more the subconscious begins to accept it as truth. This is why negative self-talk is so destructive. When a person constantly tells themselves they are not good enough, that they will never succeed, or that they are destined to fail, these words become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The subconscious, having absorbed these messages, ensures that actions, emotions, and perceptions align with this internal belief. It is not that failure is inevitable. It is that the mind, conditioned by repeated statements, orchestrates behavior in a way that leads to failure. It is a cycle that continues until a conscious effort is made to break it. The opposite is also true. If one intentionally repeats words of strength, success, and growth, the subconscious begins to accept these statements as reality. A person who constantly tells themselves, "I am powerful, I am capable, I am unstoppable," will begin to see evidence of these traits manifesting in their daily life. Not because the words themselves are magical, but because the subconscious mind, now operating under this new belief system, adjusts emotions, perceptions, and behaviors to align with them. Confidence grows, decisions become bolder, and new opportunities seem to appear effortlessly, not by chance, but because the mind is now attuned to recognize and seize them. This process is evident in every culture and tradition that utilizes mantras, affirmations, or prayers. Repetition is the cornerstone of spiritual practices because it reinforces faith, builds resilience, and aligns the individual with a greater purpose. It is not simply about saying the words, it is about programming the mind to embody them. When repeated with intention and conviction, these words begin to reshape the very core of one's identity. Scientific studies support this idea, particularly in the realm of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on new experiences and thoughts. When a belief is reinforced through constant repetition, neurons in the brain form stronger connections, making that belief easier to access and act upon. This is why people who practice positive affirmations consistently develop a greater sense of self-worth and confidence over time. The brain, having adjusted to this new internal language, responds accordingly, influencing not just thoughts but also physiological responses such as posture, tone of voice, and even heart rate. The power of repetition also plays a crucial role in overcoming deeply ingrained fears and limitations. Many individuals carry subconscious fears that dictate their actions without them realizing it. A person who has been told repeatedly that they are not smart enough, strong enough, or talented enough may internalize these beliefs to the point where they become barriers in their life. However, through deliberate repetition of empowering statements, these mental barriers can be dismantled. The subconscious, once rigidly clinging to limiting beliefs, begins to accept a new narrative. With time, the fear weakens and confidence takes its place. Repetition is not about blind optimism or superficial motivation. It is about restructuring the internal framework that guides every aspect of life. Those who understand and harness this power recognize that their words are not merely sounds, but instruments of transformation. What is spoken daily, with conviction and consistency, becomes the foundation upon which reality is built. The shadow within is an undeniable force that shapes every aspect of human existence. It is the hidden realm of the psyche, containing all the suppressed emotions, unacknowledged desires, fears, and aspects of the self that society or personal morality deems unacceptable. It is not inherently evil or destructive, but it remains a source of tremendous power that, when ignored or denied, can manifest in unconscious behaviors, self-sabotage, and internal conflicts. The journey of transformation does not begin by chasing light alone, but by acknowledging the darkness that resides within. Only by recognizing and integrating the shadow can a person truly become whole. Every individual carries aspects of themselves that they have buried, whether out of fear of rejection, guilt, or societal conditioning. These suppressed elements do not disappear. They remain within the subconscious, influencing thoughts, decisions, and reactions in subtle yet profound ways. The anger that suddenly erupts in moments of stress, the envy that lingers beneath a forced smile, the deep insecurities masked by arrogance, all of these are manifestations of the shadow. It is the part of the self that remains unspoken, yet it speaks through actions, through subconscious impulses that often seem to arise out of nowhere. Ignoring the shadow does not neutralize it. It only grants it more control. When a person refuses to acknowledge their inner darkness, it seeks expression in ways beyond conscious control. It may surface in destructive habits, irrational fears, or projections onto others. The qualities we dislike most in other people often reflect the disowned parts of ourselves. This is why those who are quick to judge and condemn others often fail to recognize similar traits within their own psyche. The more something is repressed, the more power it holds, and the more it demands to be acknowledged. True growth occurs when an individual confronts their shadow rather than running from it. This is not an easy process, as it requires one to face uncomfortable truths. It demands self-awareness and the courage to question deeply ingrained beliefs. Why do certain emotions trigger defensiveness or shame? Why do certain patterns in life keep repeating? The answers to these questions lie in the parts of the self that have been cast aside. By bringing these elements into conscious awareness, a person can begin to understand their true nature. Integration of the shadow does not mean indulging in destructive behaviors or allowing negative emotions to dominate. It means understanding that anger, jealousy, fear, and insecurity are not enemies, but signals. These emotions carry messages about unmet needs, unresolved wounds, and aspects of life that require attention. When acknowledged and understood, they lose their destructive power and instead become sources of insight and transformation. The individual who accepts their shadow does not become consumed by it. They master it. A person who has integrated their shadow operates with a sense of completeness that others can sense. They do not hide behind false personas or project their insecurities onto others. They move with confidence, not because they are without flaws, but because they have embraced all aspects of themselves. This level of self-awareness leads to genuine strength, the kind that is not dependent on external validation or fragile illusions. It creates an unshakable inner foundation from which true transformation can occur. The shadow is not a curse, it is a gateway to deeper self-understanding and liberation. The only way to master it is to face it directly, to bring light into the darkest corners of the mind, and to recognize that even in the depths of fear and doubt, there exists a path to wholeness. The power of the self is the most profound force within human existence. Beneath the layers of external identities, social conditioning, and fluctuating emotions lies something deeper. An unshakable essence that is neither defined by circumstances nor diminished by failure. This inner self is not the fragile construct of ego, which depends on external validation, but the core of being that remains constant, regardless of life's chaos. It is a source of wisdom, strength, and limitless potential, waiting to be recognized and fully embraced. Most people, however, remain disconnected from this deeper self, living instead through the masks they wear for the world. They define themselves through fleeting successes, past mistakes, or the opinions of others, never realizing that these are mere surface-level reflections of something far greater. The true self is not confined by these illusions. It exists beyond them, untouched and ever powerful. The challenge is that society does not encourage individuals to connect with this inner power. From childhood, people are taught to seek approval, to conform to expectations, and to define themselves through external achievements. As a result, they begin to measure their worth based on comparisons: who is smarter, more successful, or more admired. This creates a fragile sense of identity, one that rises and falls with every success and failure. When validation is received, there is a temporary sense of worthiness, but when rejection or failure occurs, self-doubt takes over. This constant fluctuation is exhausting, because it disconnects people from their inherent power. The truth is that self-worth should never be conditional. It is not something to be earned or proven. It is something that exists naturally within every individual. The self is not defined by what happens externally. It is not the emotions that come and go, nor the thoughts that shift with each passing day. It is something deeper, something that remains present regardless of circumstances. To recognize this power, one must begin by observing the mind without identifying with it. Thoughts arise, but they are not the self. Emotions fluctuate, but they do not define existence. Even the body, with all its sensations and experiences, is merely an instrument through which life is expressed. The self is beyond all of these things. It is the silent awareness behind every thought, the presence that observes without judgment, and the force that remains unchanged through every storm of life. When a person begins to identify with this deeper self, rather than the temporary illusions of ego, an incredible transformation occurs. Fear loses its grip because it is no longer tied to external circumstances. Confidence becomes natural because it is rooted in something unshakable. Decisions become clearer because they are not made out of desperation for approval, but from an inner knowing. This is not an abstract philosophy. It is a lived experience that anyone can access through deep self-awareness. By turning inward and questioning the false identities created by society, by observing rather than reacting, and by recognizing that no external event can diminish the true self, an individual steps into their full power. The reason so many people feel lost is because they have been conditioned to seek themselves in the outside world rather than within. They chase validation, possessions, and status, hoping these things will provide a sense of wholeness. But true fulfillment does not come from anything external. It comes from realizing that nothing external is needed to be complete. The self is already whole. It has always been whole. The only task is to recognize it, to silence the noise of conditioned thought, and to fully embrace the vast potential that has been present all along. Breaking the chains of the past is one of the most essential and challenging transformations a person can undergo. The past, with all its experiences, emotions, and conditioning, creates a psychological framework that shapes the way individuals perceive themselves and the world. It is an invisible force that influences thoughts, decisions, and even one's sense of identity. Many people live their lives unaware that they are trapped within a mental prison built from past failures, regrets, traumas, and outdated beliefs. They repeat the same patterns, react in predictable ways, and struggle with the same fears, not realizing that these limitations are not imposed by reality, but by the subconscious programming created by past experiences. The human mind is designed to learn from the past, but it does not always distinguish between useful lessons and harmful conditioning. A single moment of failure can plant the seed of self-doubt, growing into an unshakable belief that one is incapable of success. A painful betrayal can lead to a deep distrust of others, closing the heart off from genuine connection. Words spoken in childhood by parents, teachers, or peers can become lifelong scripts that dictate what a person believes they can or cannot do. The past, when left unexamined, solidifies into an internal narrative that dictates the future. This is why so many people find themselves repeating cycles they wish to escape, choosing the same unhealthy relationships, making the same financial mistakes, or struggling with the same fears that they have carried for years. Breaking free requires a conscious effort to challenge and rewrite these internal narratives. It begins with awareness, the ability to recognize that the limitations one experiences are often rooted in past experiences rather than present reality. This awareness requires deep self-examination, an honest look at the patterns in one's life, and the willingness to ask difficult questions. Why do certain fears persist? Why do certain situations trigger strong emotional reactions? Why does the mind resist change, even when change is clearly necessary? The answers to these questions often lead back to moments in the past where the subconscious mind absorbed a belief that is no longer relevant or beneficial. Once awareness is achieved, the next step is active reprogramming. This is where repetition becomes a powerful tool. Just as negative beliefs were reinforced over time through repeated experiences and thoughts, new empowering beliefs must be consciously introduced and reinforced with the same consistency. If the mind has been conditioned to believe that success is unattainable, then success must be spoken into existence daily. If the subconscious has accepted the idea that love leads to pain, then a new belief in the possibility of healthy, fulfilling relationships must be ingrained. The brain's ability to change, known as neuroplasticity, ensures that with enough repetition and emotional engagement, old mental pathways weaken and new ones become dominant. However, breaking free from the past is not about forgetting or denying what has happened. The goal is not to erase experiences, but to change the way they are perceived. Every painful event, every failure, and every hardship carries a lesson. Instead of seeing the past as a weight that drags one down, it can be transformed into a source of wisdom and strength. This shift in perception turns wounds into wisdom, failures into stepping stones, regret into motivation. The chains of the past are not broken by force, but by understanding, by choosing to no longer let old experiences dictate the present and future. The moment a person realizes that they are not bound by what has been, but rather by what they choose to believe, a new level of freedom is achieved. The past becomes a story, not a prison. The mind becomes a tool, not a master. And life, once dictated by unconscious patterns, becomes a blank canvas, ready to be shaped by conscious intention and new possibilities. Integration leads to wholeness, because true transformation is not about eliminating parts of oneself, but about bringing them together in harmony. Every individual carries multiple aspects within their psyche: strength and weakness, confidence and doubt, love and fear. These opposing forces often seem like contradictions, but in reality, they are complementary elements that, when integrated, create a balanced and empowered self. The struggle many people face is that they attempt to reject or suppress the parts of themselves they deem undesirable, believing that only by eliminating fear, doubt, or past mistakes can they achieve personal growth. However, The more one tries to deny these aspects, the more control they exert from the shadows. True freedom comes not from rejection, but from acceptance, from acknowledging every part of oneself and finding a way to bring all these elements into alignment. The human mind operates in both the conscious and subconscious realms. The conscious mind represents rational thought, logic, and deliberate actions, while the subconscious holds deep-seated emotions, instincts, and past conditioning. When these two aspects of the mind are disconnected, life feels fragmented. A person may consciously desire success, but subconsciously fear failure, leading to self-sabotage. They may long for love, but harbor unresolved emotional wounds, making it difficult to trust others. This inner conflict creates tension and confusion, preventing real progress. The key to overcoming these struggles is not to fight against them, but to integrate them. To bring the subconscious and conscious mind into alignment so that all parts of the self work together instead of against each other. One of the greatest barriers to integration is the rejection of the shadow self, the hidden aspects of personality that contain fears, insecurities, and suppressed desires. Society often teaches individuals to present only their best selves, to hide weaknesses, and to conform to external expectations. But what is ignored does not disappear, it grows stronger in the background. When a person refuses to acknowledge their anger, it manifests in passive-aggressive behavior. When fear is denied, it turns into chronic anxiety. When ambition is suppressed, it resurfaces as envy toward those who embrace their potential. The only way to break free from this cycle is to confront and accept these hidden aspects, recognizing that they are not flaws to be erased, but parts of the self that must be understood and integrated. Embracing all aspects of the self allows for deeper self-awareness and personal power. This does not mean indulging in negative emotions or justifying destructive behaviors, but rather understanding their origins and transforming them into strengths. Fear can be turned into caution and wisdom. Anger, when properly directed, becomes a force for change. Doubt, instead of being an obstacle, can be a tool for deeper reflection and careful decision-making. Every aspect of the self has a purpose, and when acknowledged and used correctly, it contributes to a greater sense of inner balance. The journey of integration requires honesty, self-reflection, and patience. It involves looking inward without judgment, recognizing every emotion and impulse as part of the human experience, and finding ways to channel them productively. When all aspects of the self are accepted and aligned, life no longer feels like a battle between different forces pulling in opposite directions. Instead, there is a sense of inner unity, clarity, and purpose. This wholeness is what leads to true confidence and fulfillment, as one no longer feels the need to prove anything to the world, but simply exists in full acceptance of who they are. The spoken word holds immense creative power, shaping reality in ways that often go unnoticed. Every word spoken carries an energetic weight, reinforcing beliefs, emotions, and perspectives that either uplift or limit an individual. People often underestimate how the words they repeatedly say to themselves and others become the framework through which they experience life. Language is not merely a tool for communication. It is a force that constructs identity, directs actions, and influences the subconscious mind. Those who speak carelessly, using words filled with doubt, fear, and negativity, unknowingly reinforce those very limitations within themselves. Conversely, those who intentionally use words to affirm strength, purpose, and transformation gradually shape a reality that reflects those truths. The mind does not differentiate between what is real and what is consistently imagined or spoken. This is why repeated affirmations, whether positive or negative, take root in the subconscious guiding behaviors and outcomes. When an individual repeatedly tells themselves they are incapable, unworthy, or destined for failure, their subconscious accepts these statements as reality, subtly shaping their decisions, body language, and expectations to align with those beliefs. This is not because words hold some mystical power of manifestation, but because they influence the way people think, act, and respond to opportunities. A person who constantly declares that they have bad luck, for example, unconsciously filters out moments of fortune, dismissing them as insignificant while magnifying setbacks. The repetition of positive, empowering words has the opposite effect. When a person consistently speaks words of confidence, resilience, and purpose, they begin to embody those qualities. This is not about blind optimism or denying challenges, but about consciously choosing to shape the internal narrative that guides behavior. The phrase "I am strong" does not magically remove obstacles, but it shifts the mindset toward overcoming them, rather than being defeated by them. When spoken with conviction, affirmations gradually rewire the brain, replacing self-doubt with self-belief, hesitation with determination, and fear with action. The change happens not because the words themselves contain supernatural properties, but because they align the conscious and subconscious mind toward a unified direction. Repetition plays a crucial role in reinforcing these shifts. Saying something once has little effect, but saying it 100 times every day imprints it deeply into the psyche. The human mind operates through habitual thought patterns, meaning that breaking free from old conditioning requires deliberate and repeated effort. This is why negative thoughts, which have often been repeated for years, feel so automatic. They have been ingrained through constant reinforcement. To counteract this, positive words must be spoken with the same consistency and emotional engagement. Over time, the mind accepts these statements as truth, allowing them to influence decision-making, body language, and even physiological responses. The spoken word is a tool for transformation, but only when used intentionally. Many people unknowingly curse themselves with their own language, reinforcing cycles of struggle by constantly verbalizing their fears and frustrations. Awareness of this tendency is the first step toward change. By consciously choosing words that reflect strength, purpose, and growth, individuals reclaim control over their inner world. What is spoken outwardly echoes inwardly, shaping not only thought patterns, but the very way life is experienced. Words are not just sounds, they are the seeds from which reality grows. The journey of transformation is not about becoming someone else, it is about returning to the power that has always existed within. By confronting the hidden parts of the self, breaking free from the chains of the past, and consciously choosing the words that define reality, true change begins. Every spoken affirmation, every moment of self-awareness, and every act of embracing both strength and vulnerability brings a person closer to their fullest potential. Life is not dictated by fate, but by the stories told within the mind and reinforced through words and actions. The key to a new reality lies in what is repeated daily. Say it, believe it, and watch as the world begins to shift in response.